Hello nerds! Today I want to talk about that all-important first scene. The two most important elements of a first scene are conflict and the introduction of character and world. A good first scene balances these two things. So when we talk about starting too early or too far into the story, which are the two main problems that occur with first scenes, that usually means that that balance is off. A first scene that occurs too early in the story is probably the more common problem, especially when you are working on a first draft or when you are a less experienced writer. We've all read one and we've all written one. It's 2,000 words of your character getting ready in the morning and nothing important actually happens. It's a scene that only serves to introduce the character and maybe the world they live in, but includes no conflict. It's boring. If you're having this problem, maybe you or even beta readers have noticed that the beginning of the book is kind of uninteresting, it isn't going to grip readers enough and make them want to keep reading. Think about how you can have more conflict in your first scene. Often that means skipping forward and starting your book even closer to the action. For example, while the movie Love, Simon can get away with starting with a 60-second montage of Simon Spears' morning routine, and we meet his family and his friends, and there's a catchy pop song and a voiceover, that sort of thing doesn't really work in books the way it does in movies. In fact, the book that Love, Simon is based on, Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, starts further into Simon's story. The second line of that book is, "I almost don't notice I'm being blackmailed." Instant conflict. Another option, if you can't or don't want to start your book further into the story, is adding more conflict to the existing scene. So to continue with our getting ready in the morning example, maybe your character is running late for something really important, which not only adds conflict, it also tells us more about what is important to your character, so it's doing double duty. Or perhaps something interrupts their normal routine. They get unexpected news that change their plans for the day. Think about the conflicts and tension that are already present in your character's life when the story starts, whether that is a recurring argument with a family member or their status as an outsider in their world, and build off of that. Because not only do you want to balance introduction of character and conflict, you also want those two things to intertwine with each other throughout your book, and especially in this first scene. So if your conflict in that first scene can tell us more about the character and the world, that's even better. It's also possible, although maybe a little bit less common, to start your book too far into the story. Sometimes this happens when we try to overcorrect from the boring, exposition-filled first scenes and try to drop readers directly into the action. And there are plenty of action-packed first scenes out there that work great. You can definitely do it. But if your first scene is all action and fighting and running for your life, and there's no sense of who this character is, what they care about, what sort of world this takes place in, it can lead to confusion for your readers and a feeling of, why should I care? Why should I root for this character? What is at stake? Your first scene should, at the very least, show your readers what your character fears and or what they care about. Hopefully both, but at least one of those. Once again, find ways to weave character development and conflict together. Why are they running for their life? What do they have to lose? What are they trying to accomplish? You don't have to spend 5 pages explaining the world building. Please don't do that, actually. But at least give your readers a peek into the world that this story is taking place in and your character's place in it. And lastly, if you're going to have an action-packed first scene, make that action meaningful. Don't just throw in a meaningless fight that has nothing to do with the rest of the book or with your character's journey just because you think that it will interest readers more. Because an action-packed first scene can also be boring if I don't care. The last thing I wanted to talk about real quick is a third important element in your first scene: the hook. I wanted to talk about this because the hook often gets confused with the inciting incident, which then leads to the story starting in the wrong place. The inciting incident is an event or moment that essentially turns your character's world and their perceptions of it upside down. It gives them new goals. This needs to happen somewhere in the first 10% of your book. So while it can be in the first scene, it doesn't have to be. What does need to be in that first scene is a hook as early as possible. And the hook is merely some interesting element within the scene that will make your readers want to keep reading the book. This can be an event like the inciting incident, or it can be a unique bit of world building, an intriguing character, a mystery that needs to be solved, a question that needs to be answered. There needs to be something in that first scene that, were someone to pick up your book without reading the back cover or inside flap or the Amazon description, those few pages would make them want to read more. Anyway, those are just some things to keep in mind when you are crafting or revising the beginning of a book. I know Nano is coming up soon, so a lot of you are going to be writing first scenes again, and figuring out where the first scene takes place and what happens in it can be a really daunting task, so hopefully this can help. Good luck with all of your writing, nerds, and I will see you this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, just like always, for our live chat.